Do you hate AEW? I don't. And I don't think any of the people on this list do. But for one reason or another, certain voices in the wrestling space, usually the ones who don't have a problem giving an unfiltered opinion, find themselves at odds with both AEW and its fan base. AEW hateration is a growing industry. Even some of AEW's diehards are slowly carnying their way into what they once called bad faith criticism. Funny how criticizing AEW is becoming a popular genre unto itself. Why? Because though no AEW Stan clutching a Media Scrum credential will admit this, most of AEW's criticism is absolutely legit. This is something the, quote, haters on this list knew before anybody. AEW continues to struggle as new TV deal negotiations are underway, and the struggle has given way to an explosion in the, quote, AEW hater industry. It's AEW's own fault, really, because speaking for myself, I don't want to see AEW fail. AEW zealots are essentially the Eagles fans of pro wrestling, but without the sense of humor. They're like the extreme liberals and even the far right who try to cancel everybody with a cross word to say about their party, and all these leaders who don't give a shit about them. So seeing AEW struggle is sad for the wrestlers they employ, but it's so satisfying for the self-righteous supermarks who dedicate their careers to defending Tony Khan by throwing matching temper tantrums. Today, we're gonna rank the top 5 AEW haters in the business. And I use the term haters loosely because to be an AEW hater, you also have to keep up with the product, watch every show, and deliver your public criticism. So essentially, you have to be engaged with AEW. Tell me, how is that any different from supporting the product? It's not, because we're not the problem. AEW is. Subscribe in Swahili. By the way, it's an election year, and my new favorite way to read news is through ground news. With ground news, you can compare headlines and stories based on media bias and find out just how much a news site leans left, right, or center. They should invent this service for wrestling news bias one day. But point is, I love this service so much, I personally reached out, they became today's partner, and now you'll love them too. The 3 constants in this world are death, taxes, and negativity getting over on social media. I just seen a video from Wendover Productions that talks about negativity bias, and there's simply no escaping it. The brain is designed to keep you alive, not keep you happy. So threats and negativity are taken more seriously than positivity. I make plenty of happy videos, just like I make plenty of negative videos. Both do well because I'm a beast, but on average, the negative videos just do better. Don't shoot the messenger. It's why AEW negativity has become like YouTube catnip. But there are 5 dogs in this business credited for hating AEW long before hating on AEW was cool. Before we get to the top 5, I'd be remiss if I didn't give a couple honorable mentions to Marvin the Movie Monster and Pro Wrestling Times. Also shouts to Chris and Company. Subscribe to their channels because like a lot of AEW haters, these guys are entertaining, they don't take themselves too seriously, and they're funny AF. Let's start with number 5 and keeping it 100. This will be an eclectic list of wrestlers, bookers, historians, writers, and real-ass niggas. Guess which one I am? Keeping It 100 represents the wrestler's perspective of AEW's flaws, and it features former WCW stars Konnan and Disco Inferno. Keeping It 100 has no problem criticizing both fans and media, which I think is part of the beauty of wrestlers being able to create their own platforms in media these days. Fanalists go so hard at these wrestlers and promotions, but are often left out of being critiqued themselves. Spaces like Keeping It 100 give a voice to the wrestler who can now clap back and talk just as crazy to these people as they do to the talent. Sounds fair to me. Plus, Disco Inferno is in the category of having a Kermit the Frog voice, and he really should have been in that Family Guy cutaway with Kermit, Ray Romano, Al Michaels, and Harold Ramis because he sounds just like them. Disco be like, AEW and the mark-ass AEW media refuse to criticize Tony Khan because they don't want their access to the AEW snow parties to be revoked. Number 4 is Vince Russo, bro. I like Vince.
They're so used to catering to customers they already have. They have totally forgotten how to get new customers. So there's no new people watching wrestling, bro.
But Vince hates everything. Okay, maybe not everything, but he's a very tough crowd. And if you've reached the highest of highs of the wrestling business after following it for decades, you'd be difficult to impress too. Ironically, most AEW fans are this way because of the amount of professional wrestling they've watched before AEW came along. This is why Tony Khan feels the need to go deep into the internet wrestling weeds to cater to the impossible to impress hardcores. How's that working for you? Russo has commented on Tony Khan's Meltzerian booking and how Tony's Wrestling Observer training wheels are one of AEW's biggest Achilles heels. He's nonplussed by the AEW big name signings like Mercedes Moné and Kazuchika Okada. He hated Tony Khan's goofy ass neck brace the way everybody else did. And if you like a little balance with your haterade, Vince thinks today's WWE superstars are unprofessional and isn't all that big of a fan of Cody Rhodes, which is where him and I differ. You can't come for Cody like that. You crossed the line, bro. But I'm not an AEW supermark, so Vince Russo doesn't have to worry about me looking up his phone number and calling his house to complain. Not that this has ever happened to me, wink wink. In fact, if AEW hatred was really all that manufactured, it wouldn't attract the entire spectrum of the wrestling business. Think about it. How are Vince Russo and Jim Cornette able to be on the same page about how shitty AEW is these days? They hate each other. Cornette got fired from TNA for threatening to murder Vince Russo. I thought about getting us all together for a real-life version of this dogs playing poker thumbnail, you know, like the AEW Player Haters Ball, but if that happened, Jim Cornette would immediately start barking at Vince Russo, then he'd bite Vince, Russo would retaliate by pissing all over Cornette's tennis racket, and by the end of that brawl, we'd all have rabies. So fuck that. I don't want the white man's rabies, do you? Number 3 on this list is Eazy-E Eric Bischoff. Like Vince Russo, Bischoff is a product of the Attitude Era. Both of their peak years in the business came during its most successful period based on television ratings and viewership. Bischoff levies many well-crafted criticisms at AEW, but this man really hates AEW press secretary Dave Meltzer. Meltzer's never booked wrestling or worked a match in his life, but Sling Blade is perfectly fine stuttering about all of his thoughts of the product over the past several decades. I have no problem with that. Get it how you live. But what I do have a problem with is the hypocrisy of Meltzer getting angry at AEW critics like Bischoff and Russo because they, quote, killed WCW and dealt with the same failures in wrestling that just about everybody has when they get into the business. The only difference between Dave Meltzer critiquing pro wrestling and Eric Bischoff critiquing pro wrestling is Bischoff actually accomplished something in the business, and it's something that has never been touched since. WCW's winning streak over Raw was so iconic, there's now a whole podcast about it, featuring Bischoff and one half of the McGuire twins.
AEW has successfully created a product that is designed to appeal almost exclusively to that segment of the audience that only prioritizes great in-ring action, which is why it's flat.
So if Dave Meltzer can stutter his way through an entire career without having actually been in the business, then who the hell is Sling Blade to get mad at anybody who is now criticizing AEW after actually having had a career in wrestling? But if Eric Bischoff is AEW's Malfoy, Jim Cornette is its Voldemort. Cornette has built the most successful platform in all of wrestling by offering his fast-talking opinions about how AEW sucks a donkey's dick, how none of these glorified micro wrestlers will ever get over, how Warner Brothers Discovery and the Turner Networks are wasting their money on an outlaw mud show run by a money mark who overbids for indie talent with his daddy's checkbook or whatever the fuck, and how all the real men in this business have given way to a low testosterone Cirque du Soleil. Thank you, fuck you, bye. Corny is an OG in pro wrestling commentary, and he was a bona fide shit talker before podcasting was even a thing. Cornette's worked shoot rants on WWE Raw were underappreciated masterpieces that were well before their time. How do I know? Because Cornette is essentially doing the same thing via podcasting, and it's bigger than just about anything in wrestling until we're number one in a year or two. Like most popular AEW haters, AEW supermarks have tried everything they can to cancel Cornette, even to the point where they work themselves into a shoot every time a Cornette thumbnail drops. Hilarious. Jim Cornette has been canceled from every pro wrestling promotion he's joined, and they think a thumbnail will be the end of his career? Please. Jimmy Cockroach will be here until he's ambulatory enough to piss on Vince Russo's grave. He said so himself on Dark Side of the Ring. Cornette is the #1 wrestling podcast, but only #2 on this list, because the #1 AEW hater is me, Alfred Kunawa of Pro Wrestling Bits, the king of all pro wrestling media. You don't have to believe me, but you have to believe that you're the best before anybody else will. And like it or not, you better learn to love it, because we the best, like a DJ Khaled drop. I'm everything you want in an AEW hater, and best of all, I have something that the others on this list don't, and that's the black perspective. Because regardless of what wrestling perspectives are out there, there's always a limitation in not only the black perspective, but black creators being comfortable enough to fully express themselves on their own platform that they own. People forget this, but I used to be a favorite of AEW. I interviewed just about all their top talent. I spoke with Tony Khan, and I even covered every week of AEW's destruction of NXT during the Wednesday Night Wars. The WWE side hated me for this, by the way, but after one little video about AEW's lack of black excellence, the AEW Stan base exposed themselves for who they really are. AEW insurrectionists basically had a January 6th party on my timeline. I've never seen the N-word misspelled so many different ways. This is really only the bottom of AEW's fan base, I hope, which is why I still support the product. But it was enough to incentivize me to never hold back when I had an AEW criticism. AEW themselves got so mad at me for pointing out their lack of black main eventers, they changed their password for their media photo library so that I'd have to Google their media photos for my articles instead. Like a child taking toys back from a kid he doesn't like. Really showed me. I've drawn the ire from AEW for leaking the Fast National ratings early, which are typically slightly lower than the final number and sometimes slightly higher. Scandalous, right? My analysis of AEW's lack of black excellence played a key role in people like Swerve ultimately being a world champion, because the only reason WWE took over 60 years to crown a black champion of their own was because they didn't have an Alfred Konuwa to call them out during the era of the Old Boys Network. I'm a living embodiment of everything AEW antagonizes, like everybody else on this list. Charismatic, funny, innovative, doesn't take himself too seriously, and thinks Dave Meltzer is full of shit. I'm not just the #1 AEW hater, I'm one of one in everything. AEW slander is just one of the services I offer. I'm also #1 in unfiltered commentary about race in wrestling. We're #1 in animated wrestling content, #1 in pro wrestling documentaries, #1 in pro wrestling production, word to Rio and Mav, #1 like Bianca Belair in the WWE draft. There's a lot of lanes in pro wrestling, but the diversity of these lanes is what gives the wrestling media life. Yes, there's an anti-AEW lane that does well for a lot of people. The finger-wagging, enjoy wrestling people will cry about it, but fuck all this lane shaming. Just do you. Everybody tries to give people advice to make people more like them. But no matter what your lane is, my only advice is to try to be more like you, unapologetically. Chris Van Vliet is the happy-go-lucky, harmless daytime interview guy. Not that there's anything wrong with that. That works for him. In the words of Marshall Mathers, Van Vliet doesn't have to write jokes to get subscribers. Well, I do, so fuck him and fuck you too, respectfully. But disrespectfully, Cousin Jerry has to scream racial slurs to get subscribers. Well, I don't, so fuck him and fuck his robes. Point is, there's something for everybody in wrestling, even the bigots. I hate that I have to admit that, but yes, you can be a bigot in the pro wrestling space and make a living, just like you could be an alleged predator and still force your way back into WWE. Horrible, I know, but I don't make the rules. The wrestling business is still the Wild West in a lot of ways. And even though every creator gets put in a box, very rarely is that the only thing said creator has to offer. In fact, the only box I want to be inside is your mama's box. What's up? Because if you can grow an audience talking about AEW's whack-ass product, you can grow an audience doing just about anything. I just seen Jim Cornette give his take on the Kendrick Lamar and Drake beef. Some of our biggest videos have nothing to do with hating on AEW or even AEW in general. You kind of have to be a chameleon to last in the wrestling media. And if being an AEW hater is one of my skin tones, then I'll wear it proudly like the darkest shade of a black fist emoji, because I'm just giving the market what it wants. Check out this video about Tony Khan's intervention and subscribe. What lane are you in? Do you hate AEW? Tell me in the comments.